Fyodorowna Semyonova with her big dumb face.
The longest opening sequence.
When are all chairs bolted to the...
We're not told that.
Yeah, we do.
We're not told that.
It is written. It is written.
Happy holidays.
Yay.
Get off your phone. I can hear it. I can hear it clicking.
I wasn't even on it. I wasn't even on
anytime I'm editing, I see you doing this, and I don't notice it when we're recording Bond episodes, but then later I see you're like this, and I'm like, dude's not even listening. And I just want to put a black overlay over you. I'm just like, every time. It's like the time that Johnny was eating. Remember, Goldfinger. Johnny was eating the whole time, and I'm like,
well, he wouldn't even
I called him. I was like, "Why were you eating through the whole episode?" He's like, "Dude,
I hadn't even finished watching the movie. He was like watching the movie as we were talking about the movie. Yeah. He was like, "I gotta watch Goldfinger." Like, oh, I'm watching it right now. I've got it on ×2. I'm like,
and then later, I'm like, Johnny. I mean, it's not like we nixed him or anything. Johnny's just that busy because he's constantly.
He's a doctor. He's saving lives.
He's saving lives,
doing
and
the
then
Lord's
we're like,
work.
"Can you watch all the Bond movies and then talk about them?" Anyway, we're both wearing sweaters.
I was like, let's wear a sweater today. I didn't wear a Christmas sweater. I just found something that was kind of brown and felt like the 70s.
Yeah, well, and also. I'm just gonna shamelessly chug whiskey the whole time because that's all they did in this movie. So,
you got the wrong. You gotta get the right brands.
Right, I know, but I mean,
it's the brands. But that's the brands. Okay, that's close. I mean, I like that. Yeah, that's nice.
Look how well this fits with the aesthetic.
You look like you feel like you should be in the movie. Like I just want to live in this movie. I just want to tell you that. I just want to live in there.
I agree.
I want to live in this movie.
I had so many feels, namely nostalgia. We've talked about Bond movies, and I remember Nans would bring up nostalgia, and I was like, "F nostalgia. I don't care about nostalgia. I have no nostalgia for Bond. Yeah. I don't care." And this movie, almost immediately, I'm just like, "Oh, that feeling of like." For anybody who doesn't know, like this takes place between Christmas and New Year's, and a little after. It's just the holidays after school. And before school starts up again, and for second semester, and like that's always been my favorite time of year. So immediately I just got hit with like, oh God, the feels. And this takes place 20 years before you and I were born. So, but all the same, I was just like, remember that? And then it's one of those movies with no cell phone. Like nowadays, if you want to make a good movie, you have to make it in the past before cell phones existed, because cell phones just made all storytelling suck. Not only do you have to
then you have
the story, like people doing and putting text on screen and all that new age crap, but also with this movie he would just keep calling his parents and come pick me up, and it just everything's
it'd be a very different movie.
The backside of society is what I'm getting at.
It'd be a very different movie. Anyway, let's go into your review.
Akanstall. Boom. Okay, already kind of hinted at liking this. So anyway, The Holdovers is what they call an instant classic. It's what people are talking about when they say they don't make them like they used to. It's one of those snapshot of life, full range of emotion type of movies that keeps you hooked from beginning to end because the story flows as naturally as a stream as opposed to the artificial canal of formulaic story structure. It's nostalgic without being forceful. It's hilarious in a subtle, very down-to-earth way. And it's never more melancholic or dramatic than it needs to be. It's everything that Wes Anderson movies used to be before he left reality for his quirkily filmed stage plays. Instead, this movie reads like a classic American novel with a limited cast and setting, and by the end, you fully understand and therefore love each character because they are real people trapped in the tragic shortcomings of real life, where the losers lose while watching the winners win and making the best of it regardless. Therefore, it's not triumphant. It's not even particularly heartfelt or inspiring. Hardly anything changes from beginning to end other than a greater understanding and connection between a small group of disparate people. And to that end, it is beautiful. Now let's cry.
I wouldn't say it's not untriumphant, but it's I would say I would call this movie just subtle all across the board. Like it is
Yeah.
so subtle. Like
It's not
I think
like what's the movie? What's the movie with where the genie? Jesus.
Genie?
The genie. For some reason,
Shazam? Aladdin?
yeah, the greatest why
Aladdin?
yeah, no, not Aladdin. Who played the genie? Why is his name escaping me?
Robin Williams?
When what was the movie where Robin
Good Will Hunting.
Dead Poet Society.
Oh, Dead Poet Society. Okay.
Is like triumphant. Everybody get up on your desk and we're all gonna
Right.
carry each other through the yard. This isn't that movie. This movie is when all of those guys go home for the holidays and all the losers have to stay behind with not even the fun teacher, not Robin Williams, but with like the teacher everybody hates. That's where this is the story for the not the winners, and I mean I don't want to call them losers, but just like normal people, right? The normal people who are forced into an ishy situation. And for anybody who's ever been on a work trip or just stuck somewhere for a few days, you know that feeling of like at first you're like, God, none of us want to be here, but we're kind of forced together, and then eventually over time you start to form those bonds, and then we're with them as the audience, and so we start to form those bonds, and then as things go, the more you start to understand people, a little love follows, because love is understanding, and that's like the classic formula of a movie like this, is that like you're like, God, this guy's weird and that kid's a punk and this woman is like quiet, but then slowly but subtly it just wins you over. So it's just like it's just that level of instant classic. 'Cause for me, it's one of those where I'm like, I might watch this every holiday season now.
I've seen it twice now. So like I thought we were gonna watch this one, and then we didn't, because we did Talk to Me instead. And then I was like, I need to watch it again.
Yeah.
So for me, this was like the perfect movie to take my parents. So I took my parents and I took my uncle. And like for me, my dad graduated, like I think he graduated in like 70 or 71 from high school. So this was like roughly around the same time that he would have been going into college, leaving high school. So it's like it probably was a little nostalgic for him as well, because he would be like, yeah, this is exactly kind of how things looked and felt at that same time period. And like even like that was the other thing that this movie reminded me of, is every like story my dad had told me about like going to college in the 70s. And I'm like, yeah, this is what, like, watching this movie feels like what he describes to me and what he's shown me in like yearbook pictures and stuff like that. But without further ado, let's get into kind of the behind the scenes of this movie. Just getting a little nostalgic here. We got the change the font here. That's the
Well, and obviously, you know, when the movie starts, they used all everything that opened the movie was of the time. It was of 1970. So
I'll talk a little bit about that too.
Even how they lay out the credits, where the credits end with like the MPAA trademark logo and all that stuff. Only old movies did that before they realized that it's kind of ugly. Let's put that at the end of the credits at the very end, right?
Right.
When everybody's left the theater. But here they put that all at the outset, and then the whole movie has that. It looks like it was shot on film.
But it was not shot. It wasn't shot. It was not shot on. Yeah.
But like I wish I was editing this right now, because I could kind of mimic the style. You know, you could put like the specific LUT on it with like the faded
kind of
film look,
saturated look.
Yeah, and then throw in film grain and all that. And it like, that's where you're just like, God, we really did peak. We already peaked as a society. We already peaked. So
yeah, check out our merch this Christmas.
Yay.
It's something, and I tie in Christmas or Hanukkah, you know, if you want, you know, or holidays, whatever. But
yeah,
our merch, you know,
sit on it, but you can't
just
take it with you. Everybody selling like hotcakes. Everybody wants one.
Everyone wants this shirt, and they want to put it by their Bond posters, and people walk by and like, why is that?
Yeah,
what is that?
Why would you buy that? Why would you waste?
It's a great
so much money on
It's a great conversation starter. I'm pretty sure you'll pick up women with it as well.
At a holiday party, dude, we should make a Christmas sweater out of that design.
Oh, can we do that?
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Lickety split. I wish though. It was like this.
Let's figure something out.
You know.
Yeah, let's figure something out, man.
Yeah.
The
We'll try.
Christmas sweater said, yeah. So let's talk
Mhm.
about the Oh, I normally put like who directed and wrote it, but yeah, Holdovers, directed by Alexander Payne and written by David Hemmingson. Let's talk about this movie. So I just kind of this is going to be real brief, like as far as what I don't have a 50 slides for this movie because we're
Cool.
going to kind of get down to the nitty gritty, and it's very very brief. So Alexander Payne, who is best known for the satirical dramas, most notably Sideways from 2004 and The Descendants in 2011. Both were, or 2011, both were nominated and both won Best Adapted Screenplay. He had an idea for making a movie about a teacher watching students over Christmas break after seeing the film from 1935. It's a French comedy called Merlasules. I don't know how to. I didn't take French. Merlasules. Yeah, I didn't take French. Is that exactly how you say it?
Yeah. Just try to
Beautiful.
say it, but don't actually
Just vomit.
pronounce
Just
any.
vomit
Yeah,
it
yeah.
out.
Just combine it all into a couple vowels, and that's French.
Oh, like Joey from Friends. Okay, French it up. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. He said he never got around to writing the idea, so he had this idea. But then subsequently, he was handed a TV pilot by writer David Hemmingson, whose pilot was just that. It was kind of the same idea. Then they decided to develop that into a movie. This would be Hemmingson's first feature film. So he had written a bunch for television, mostly Just Shoot. He did Just Shoot Me. Like I looked at his credits, stacked, like so many different television shows over the years. But most notably, he did Just Shoot Me. He did Don't Talk to the Bee in Apartment 23. He did a bunch of other stuff. So then they ended up writing and making this movie. The movie was filmed in Massachusetts, all on location, which is kind of rare. A lot of times you'll do a movie like this, and sometimes they'll have to build a set someplace because for whatever reason. I was watching an interview with Alexander Payne. He was talking about sometimes you have to build a bathroom or a bedroom because cameras and things won't fit. But he's like, this movie, we never built a single set.
Wow.
So the whole thing's shot on location everywhere. Payne said he always wanted to make a 70s film that he remembered in his youth. And you were just mentioning like all the graphics and stuff. They got a graphics designer to even create logos for Miramax and for Focus Features, which weren't around in the 70s. So they kind of made a slightly period accurate
what would it have been? Yeah.
logo. So yeah, I mean, and this is basically what that is. It's just very 70s looking movie.
I love stuff
and
like
I love that.
Yeah.
And I kind of, after watching this, I'm like, I've seen The Descendants. I don't think I appreciated it at the time, but I want to go back and watch Sideways. I know a lot of people, especially screenwriters, talk about Sideways being like this classic that you kind of have to watch because of how well written it is.
Didn't he do
and
Nebraska as well?
He did Nebraska. Yeah. Like a lot of his movies are really well, like, yeah, I feel like they're all very subtle. They're not these big, there's not big blockbuster dramas. They don't do anything crazy, but they're really, really well written and really well acted.
That's why I brought Wes Anderson into it, because when you watch things like Bottle Rocket or even
Royal Tenenbaums,
it's not now, and we've talked about this several times, where this thing happens when a director becomes the star of the show, and then the whole time you just see their fingerprints on it. The first time we talked about this was who's a better director, Tarantino or Martin Campbell. And I made the argument that it would be Campbell, because you don't see him in every shot. He lets the story lead. And, and we talked about this because of things like the MCU. They bring in directors who are going to serve, like TV directors, that will service the whole series and not just bring themselves into it. So with this, it's not, the director isn't the star of the show. You're the whole time you feel like you're watching real life. This is one of those incredibly immersive movies where you really are just living with these people for 2 hours. You exit this reality and you join theirs, and that never breaks. There's maybe one detail that for a moment I was like, suddenly I was kind of like, wait, are we going into fantasy?
There's one shot in this movie where I was like, modern cars. One shot. Like I remember watching it. And I was like,
cars.
So there's a shot.
Was it the quick zoom out?
No. When they go from when they're at Barton, and then they're like, oh, we got to go to Boston. And as they're driving to Boston, when they're doing that montage, there's a shot of the car driving down a highway. And if you look behind the car on a side street that is kind of parked almost parallel to it, there
Yeah.
are multiple like modern day cars parked at the, and it was like
Funny.
somebody at location, somebody screwed up and just was like,
Yeah, nobody will notice.
well, no one noticed,
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah.
obviously I did. I was like, but
Yeah. So, but
very
that's
well
the whole thing is that
immersed.
it is one of those. I know it's a cliche, but it's one of those snapshot of life type of movies, and it's one of those where the stakes were set up very well, where it's like it's set up, and then you're just ready to uh submit yourself to this
Right.
story. You're just like, okay, we're gonna be here, and we have to kill 2 weeks of time, and like I said. I immediately was like, oh God, I'm getting hit with that nostalgia because it's always been my favorite time of year. Is like everything shuts down for 2 weeks, and if it doesn't,
Right.
it should just shut down, and then you're just amongst people that you love and want to be with, friends and
Yeah.
family. Except in this case, strangers. And then by the end of it, it's a classic one of those people come together who just never whether they liked each other or not, they're stuck together. But over time, just like I said, if you've ever been on a work trip and just over time, it's like you kind of become a little family,
Yeah.
And
You're
so this is
talking
one
about
of
those
those stories.
let's talk about those strangers real quick because like
Yeah.
literally there's a little bit more to this cast. This isn't the whole cast, but when it comes down to it, this is the main people we focus on through the entire film.
Yeah.
So first off, we have Paul Giamatti plays Paul Hunnam, which is the professor. Professor Hunnam, I think is how they said it, right? Professor, teacher Hunnam, Mr. Hunnam. I don't recall if they called him
I'd say Mr.
professor.
Hunnam. Yeah, I'd say Mr.
Yeah,
Hunnam.
Mr. Hunnam. This is his second time working with Payne. Again, the first time was with Sideways, and everyone mentions that. So this is like they haven't worked together since, which is crazy because you would think these guys had worked together a bunch, but no, this is only their second time working together. Next, we got Dominic Sessa, who plays Angus Tully. So he has the most interesting story here. So this is his first film role ever.
Wow.
He never did film. He graduated high school in 2022 at Deerfield Academy, which is actually one of the locations where they filmed the movie. And what happened was he became aware of the auditions. He was in the drama department. Of course, he was a student there. He did a bunch of the school plays and things like that. They told him, "Hey, there's this movie they're filming. Alexander Payne's filming this movie. They're looking to audition this role. They're having trouble finding it. They auditioned a bunch of people, and apparently they just didn't really feel like whoever they were auditioning really worked out for the role. So he was like, yeah, I guess I'll do that. Like he didn't really think about it. He was like, okay, whatever. So he auditioned for it. He auditioned for Payne about 5 or 6 times and then finally actually got the role.
Wow.
And yeah, he had only acted in school plays prior to this. So this is his first film role. So we may see him in other things in the near future. He may just like move out to Hollywood and start being in movies. He might start getting phone calls left and right, getting an agent. Who knows? Probably already did.
Don't go to
Probably
Hollywood though. Just stay put and send tapes.
I could also see this guy going to New York too. Just he could end up in New York and end up going to Broadway. Who knows? The last person we have on our list is Divine Joy Randolph, plays Mary Lamb. She has a background in Broadway, many TV credits to her names, including the shows like Empire or The Idol, which I watched not that long ago. It wasn't that great. Film-wise, you may recognize her from Dolomite Is My Name, which I believe was a Netflix show, and as well as Office Christmas Party. But she's been in other stuff. She just hasn't had anything like really that big. But she's been in tons of stuff. So all three of these casts, like these three are just like they're all great. They're killer. They're just all great. They're all great. I could go on and on, but I guess let's talk about the movie. Like I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I'm at lost at words as far as like where we're gonna rank this because I'm like, I really like this movie, and I'm like, oh my god, this is my new personal favorite. My old personal favorite was missing. My new personal favorite is this movie because I've seen this movie now 2 times, and I just love the soundtrack. I just love this movie because it's just. I think maybe it's just because over the entire year I got so sick of just seeing the same like science fiction or fantasy kind of things, and this is the first movie that is, it's not a historical drama, but I mean, it's like historical, whatever. But it's just like a pure, just like, this is just a pure story. That's all it is. Just a pure story. There's no science fiction. It's all just about humans. It's just a pure drama. And I just love it. Just love it.
I feel like Mr. Hunnam
Love it.
and your oh man, what's his name again?
Which one?
Angus.
Yeah.
I feel like Mr. Hunnam and your Angus, and Angus is like, you're just a crabby old man who hates everything. And I'm like, no, I have standards. As you and I've gone over repeatedly, you're like, The Nun 2 isn't that bad. Why are you such a crabby butthead? And I'm like, no, it's that bad. It's crap. Because, and then, last week you give me Talk to Me, and I'm like, there you go. Talk to Me is awesome. I love it. And you're like, oh, you actually are capable of loving things. And then you, McCurdy, you send me to see this movie because, that's from the get-go. McCurdy's the one who schedules what we watch. He's the one who tortures me by being like, yeah, go see Five Nights at Freddy's. And then I want to kill myself. I watched this movie, and from beginning to end, I'm in love. And let's just pull up the list. There's no comparison to it in that regard. There's nothing that I watch. I mean,
No.
I walk out of
There's
Infinity
where
Pool.
I think it should go, but yeah.
I walk out of Infinity Pool. My brain is on fire by how well they captured meaning. Same with Beau Is Afraid. I've said that a million times.
Right.
Killers is just like, good job.
A really well done movie overall.
And that's where people throw around every time Scorsese comes out with a movie, they have to pay some idiot to write the word masterpiece, so then they can put that up in the reviews. It's another masterpiece. It's not his masterpiece. That's another one of those terms
that
that's
one,
thrown around so often that it loses meaning.
Yeah.
And then there's Oppenheimer that is a tour de force. This is the movie, though.
That one is a masterpiece. Oppenheimer,
it is.
I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, we agree. That is currently masterpiece as of now.
Right.
That is the best film that Nolan has made at this point, even though it's mostly just guys talking in rooms. So be it. It was great. This movie is the one of this year that you walk out and you're transformed in the sense that you're like, I fell in love. I went in. I didn't know any of these people. They're all strangers, and just like the characters in the story itself. And like I said, nothing changes from beginning to end. Like,
well,
other than the fact that they, but that's nothing.
Dude, I love that ending. But we can
great
talk
ending.
about it.
Great ending. But
we can
overall,
talk about it. But tell me what you're thinking.
The losers still lose. The winners still win. Even regardless of that ending, losers lose, winners win. But all these people share a deeper connection, and you do too. And I watched it with for some reason this weekend there was a lot of probably I texted you. You were like, "Oh, it's Thanksgiving break." Great. There are a lot of people at the theater this weekend. I am used to watching every one of these movies by myself. I watched it with dozens of people, which is a lot for me, and everybody was. I had one. There's one woman. There's one woman in the audience specifically who reacted to every last thing, every shot. Like, for example, there's a moment when Angus walks into Mr. Hunnam's room and he steals the keys for the whole building. And the moment they cut to the keys, she goes, "Uh-oh." But I was like more than okay with it because everybody was so engaged with the film. That it was a joy. Everybody was laughing together. That same woman, every time there was a sad moment, she was like, "Oh no," like it was. But it was great. Everybody was on board. It was a great theater going experience. I felt like I knew everybody in the theater. And we all loved
the end
each
of that
other.
movie.
We were all hugging afterwards.
You guys were all like,
cheering,
dude.
clapping.
I laughed. So it was so great. So I went and I saw it the first time. I think it was like a small audience because this movie hasn't gotten a big release. It's kind of slightly limited. And so I went and saw it with nobody. Then I went and saw it with my parents. And it was a joy to like listen to my dad and my uncle and my mom like laughing at some of the jokes. Like one of my favorite lines in the whole movie is like he says something. I think Hunnam says something, and then Angus replies. He's like, "Man, I thought all the Nazis were hiding out in Argentina." And I
yeah.
was just like,
And it's
"That's so
Hunnam.
good."
Or no.
Hunnam.
That was Angus the first time.
Angus says it. Yeah, Angus.
And then later
Angus says that to him.
Later, Hunnam, when they're at and he's at that point he's the crabby teacher, and he's for that 50 push-ups, no push-ups involved, but I'm illustrating a point. But then later, after they've grown close because they've been stuck together, just the two of them, they're at a restaurant where they want to get Cherry's Jubilee or something.
Jubilee.
But it has alcohol that they burn off to set it on fire.
And they're like smart ass.
And they're like, just let the kid order it. And he goes, what kind of fascist establishment are you running here? So it was a callback to his Nazi line early on. And I didn't know anything about the writer, but that he wrote Just Shoot Me. It's like, yeah, this movie is full of that sharp sarcasm that whole show is about. And I never watched the Bee and Apartment 23, but I assume it had the same type of stuff. Real quick though, while he's here, Cycle Man 90, who we've never met. How you doing, Cycle Man? Hey guys, love the channel. This is a random question, but when will you be ranking the rest of the Bond movies? I actually coincidentally wrote that in the Discord today. Let me just read what I wrote. Okay, the main discussion forum video, which is over 4 hours long and about 50 layers deep, more than that, is halfway through the initial export, which takes about 3 days. Then it's back to tightening up each main segment, of which there are 9 of varying lengths from 5 minutes to 90 minutes. Then all of those are tied together, and then separate passes are made to sweeten that overall thing repeatedly until it's the best that it can be. So to answer your question, Cycle Man, I have no idea. Anyway, moving on. Huevos.
Hold on, wait,
go back. Kind of in the Discord talking about this. Huevos, like he said, top 3 right here. Said 3 to 4.
Yeah, I would agree. It's in the top 3.
I agree. My initial thought. Oh, layers. Huevos means like any, like right now the image you're looking at, Huevos. There's only a few layers here. There is the background layer there, which is a Photoshop file, which in and of itself is made of several layers. The text layer, the images put on top. Then there's McCurdy and I. That's another layer. And then there's the list. So that's layers. But when you look at a Bond episode, our discussion forum shot is like, I should make a video where I just take off all the layers and then build them up one by one. That would be fun. But that's everything you ever see is every image, every movie, every whatever. It's just like a series of layers on top of each other that are then exported. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, this movie, Oppenheimer, is a tour de force. That's my first thought.
Put it above Oppenheimer. I cannot put
Oppenheimer is a tour de force.
The only movie I can't put it above. Maybe Killers of the Flower Moon.
I could
maybe.
This movie, like I keep saying, it's a movie you fall in love with. So your emotional attachment to it is far superior to Killers of the Flower Moon. I have no doubt that by the end of the night, we'll put this at number 2. Because even though it is a subtle movie.
Coming into this tonight, I was like, I think it's above. I'm thinking it's in the top. My gut reaction though, I was like, I don't know how Charlie's gonna feel. I mean, I could even see it being closer to like Air or Gran Turismo and that kind of category. But after thinking about it, I'm like, no, I think this definitely rises above all those movies, and I do think it's kind of somewhere in the top 3. And I would say probably, but I don't think it beats Oppenheimer. I think you and I are really going to talk about, like, is this above or below Killers of the Flower Moon? Now, there's a part of me though that I think on one level, I would say it is above Killers of the Flower Moon. On another level, I think there's a part of me that thinks it might be just slightly below Killers of the Flower Moon. But it's like, it's again, we're talking about the top cream of the crop out of 50 movies, almost 50 movies at this point. So I'm just like, and I love this movie. And that's the hard part is like, I've seen this movie twice now. and I just really, really adored it. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe that's just me saying, yeah, maybe it just should go above Killers.
Well,
Because
first off, does Focus Features make bad movies? Can anybody please anybody in the comments,
I don't
can you
know
name
if
a
they have or
bad
not.
Focus Feature movie? They just and this is their specialty, are these types where, I mean, Wes Anderson, aren't his movies Focus Features too?
No,
They're
his are
these type
Disney
of
or Fox.
true, like, this is what art is again, it's a cliche, but that snapshot of life
Oh yeah, you're right.
idea. That is what movies should be,
Asteroid
right?
City was Focus. Yeah.
I think most of Wes Anderson's are Focus Features, if I
Yeah, he's
remember
usually. I think
correctly.
he gets produced through. Because is Miramax still? Because Miramax got bought by Disney at one point, but now it's like owned
Yep.
by somebody completely different. Like, yeah, I mean, it's owned by somebody different.
Well, once the Weinstein thing happened, they were like,
Yeah.
we need to wash all this away. Yeah.
Yeah, it's now owned by somebody else completely, but I'm pretty sure they got like, I thought Miramax was still under the Disney umbrella, so I could be wrong about that.
It is. I'm pretty sure it is still. I don't think they
No, it
sold
says
off.
here, okay, but it's saying Focus Features is a division of Universal. Looking
maybe they
at
did.
this, but I mean, I don't know, a lot of different, different. It doesn't matter if it's what am I getting at? I think it's a hit or miss on any end, on a lot of different production companies, because even though that a lot of people say A24 makes some of the best movies, and like Talk to Me was a great movie.
Yeah.
There are some bad A24 movies, especially in the beginning of when they were starting to come out. So
Do you have examples?
one of my least favorite A24 movies is Mojave. I thought that movie is just
Haven't even heard of it.
like, it's a movie with what's his name from he was in Star Wars. He's been in now every big thing. He was in the new Star Wars. He played like Poe Dameron.
Poe Dameron? Oh, that was okay. That was my guess.
What's his name? I'm blanking on names right now. Someone
Oscar Isaac.
Oscar Isaac. Thank you, Oscar Isaac.
Isaac.
It's a movie where Oscar Isaac plays like some kind of criminal dude, and the Garrett Edwards. I think it was Garrett Edwards who was in not Garrett Edwards. It was the guy who was in Tron. Plays some kind of director, creative type. We don't know. He goes out to the desert. He does something to Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac comes back after him.
A24 makes really good, meaningful horror movies. That's all I associate with A24 at this point, be it Hereditary or Midsummer or Talk to Me. Other than that,
they make other movies.
Focus Features themselves, though. Focus Features is what is good about Focus Features. And I used to, one of my roommates in college was a hardcore hipster, always smoking hookah in the basement, always 24/7. He would always constantly, he was just like, Focus Features is the best thing ever. And I was like, well, I agree. My initial instinct is to hate it because you're a hipster and I hate hipsters, but we would watch a lot of Focus Features. And it was like, yeah, these movies are just what you expect art house movies to be, right? Where they are slightly intellectual, but when you give them a chance, if you can, I mean, that's why they're good for theater going, because if you can go in, turn your phone off and submit to great K1. K1's always got the jokes, dude. Great sweater energy here. K1, you're a funny dude, man. You're a funny dude. We've said that before. You're funny.
We were thinking the same thing when we did this. We're like, yeah, man, this movie's a sweater movie.
I always have to think
it's a fall sweater movie.
You though, McCurdy, nobody has your you've got the costume brain. I just try to follow. I try to keep up with you, and I rarely
we were
do.
subtle tonight, though. We were like sweater.
Yeah.
And
So
we didn't even talk to each other about it. That's great.
No,
anyway, you're talking about focus.
yeah.
You're talking about your
I knew.
boyfriend. You're talking about your boyfriend.
I knew what you would do.
I mean,
anyway,
your roommate.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like Focus Features. What I'm getting at is they excel at this. The Oscar bait, like in cynical terms, Oscar bait, the real, true to life, human drama type of movie. That's what art should
condition.
be. It reflects real life and not an idealized life. Like, and specifically, what I mean by that in this movie is that the young kid meets gorgeous girl, hits it off with her, but then they have to leave. Professor meets like this could be the love of his life, but she turns out she's with a more attractive guy, obviously, because he's gross and he's got weird eyes and he's
And he smells
old
like
and he
fish.
smells like it. There's no moment where, like, anytime that they kind of float the idea of like maybe things will work out, they don't, because that's life, and that's where this movie excels. The moment you think that it's leading you, like, okay, did you ever see Her?
No, you're talking about the one that was about Siri,
Yeah.
but no, I did not see that
The
one.
brilliance of Her was that, the whole time you're watching it, you're like, is this going to take off at some point to where if this series tries to kill him or something, or becomes like the Disney movie Smart House and like starts messing up his life? And no, it never does. It restrains itself so that it's always in reality. It never, anytime you think like, okay, wait, is this where the story's going now? It changes. It shifts, and it's like, okay, well, now we're doing this, and then it changes again. And that's what I mean, where it's in my opener, it's like a stream moving naturally like this, as opposed to a canal, which is just this.
Right.
It's just straight. It's
Like
like
we
this is
expect everything to
beginning,
happen.
middle, end, and and you expect everything. This
Because this movie at one point,
flows as it
at
needs
one
to.
point in this movie, there is a point in this movie where you think it's going to go one way, and then it completely goes completely different direction. And that moment to me is when we first are introduced to, like, okay, hey, you're gonna be watching all these students, and they all have to stay for a break. And we were introduced to all four of these characters. One's a football star who doesn't get a
5.
haircut, so his 5. Okay, thank you. So one's a football star. He doesn't get his hair cut. One's an Asian foreign exchange student. He can't go back to Korea. One's a Mormon, and I guess his parents are on a mission. Another one's another a-hole kid, and there was something really stupid about, like, his parents are renovating, so he can't come home. But then Angus kind of chastises him and says,
Dude.
like, nobody does. What was it? He said
Nobody
does
renovates their
makeovers
house in the winter.
house
You
in the
idiot.
winter.
Your parents
Nobody
just
likes
don't want
you.
you
Your
to go
parents-
home. Because he was like, yeah,
He
they're
was just being a
renovating the
dick.
house, so they have to put all the tools in my room. He's like, the only
Right.
tool in your parents, and the only tool in your bedroom is you. Like, their back and forth, their
you
war
think-
was so good.
That's
And again,
great.
that's the
But-
writer. That
right,
writer knew
but-
what he was doing.
What my point though is that first you think the movie's going to be about these characters, but then all of a sudden it's like, nah, it's not about these characters.
we
we're gonna
remove all
we're
of
gonna
them.
pull the rug
Oh.
out from under you and make Angus feel worse about his life.
Yeah.
Everybody gets to go with the rich dad with the football player, and they're gonna go skiing for those.
They're
2
going to
weeks
take a
while he's-
helicopter to go skiing for the rest
skiing.
of break.
And then he's
Ugh.
left there at school with the worst teacher. Like, everybody hates this teacher, and
Yeah.
it's just him and this teacher, and he's just and the cafeteria lady who's lost her son. So that's a whole other
She's
level of
drunk
baggage.
and depressed, and okay.
And
So
it's like-
McCurdy, to my point, the
To
more
your point,
the triumphant movie, the BS movie, the idealized life movie would be where we
Right.
followed those kids to Vail or something, right? Like,
Right.
life's great. Instead, we continue to follow the losers, and at some point they have. And I know that's a harsh term, but I mean it so far as, like,
and I
it
get what you're
reflects
saying, yeah.
that life sucks, life is unfair, and this reflects that innate unfairness. And that's where movies like this excel, where they, again, oh, is the ugly professor gonna get with the hot chick? No, because that's not reality. Instead, he has to, by the end, spoiler alert, by the end, he sacrifices his job for this kid. And the best endings of any story in my book are tragic but hopeful. Right. So it's tragic. Like, oh God, this really good teacher loses his job. The one guy trying to hold people to standards, which is, again, you always joke that the book I wrote is Mein Kampf. That's what my book is about. Is like is about sacrifice and about standards and all that.
Right.
And that one guy trying to do the right thing and be a good teacher is the guy who suffers in the end. But then he has to go off and stop being so dependent on kind of hiding from the world in this school, and he has to go figure something else out. So it's tragic but hopeful. Those are the best endings.
So let me just run through what I wrote about all of this movie because I kind of broke down each of the characters and their heartbreak, and then I pretty much touched on exactly what you said. So we're kind of really on the same page about this movie. So I said, and I'll even talk about like one of my favorite parts of the movie, but we'll do that towards the end. So with Giamatti's characters with Hunnam, he plays that role. First off, Giamatti plays that role perfectly. Like he's like right now with Oscar contending role actors right now, like it's like between him and like, I mean, unfortunately Barbie for some weird reason, but whatever. And then it's
for some weird
Ryan
reason,
Gosling,
McCurdy.
for some weird reason.
What a weird
reason
that
what a weird reason
feminism is going to be championed by the bullish Academy. If they made a climate change movie, that would win Best Picture.
Calm down. All right, calm down, Mr. Hunnam. Okay, calm down.
Don't get me going, dude.
So anyway, so it's like I liked his character. He's like this asshole you feel for once you learn how much of a loser in life he has been. So he was like, he went to college, he went to Harvard, and then he got kicked out of Harvard because he ran over he hit his roommate with a car over a fight because his roommate said he stole his paper. But then he's stuck at Burton for like, and you were talking about Wes Anderson. This seems like such a Wes Anderson thing where he is like the obsessive character in a Wes Anderson movie where he really thinks that Burton is this institution that like is the best thing in the world. And he's lived there for pretty much most of his life. And based off what you kind of hear about him, what you learn about him.
Dreams. Someday I'm going to write that book.
Someday I'm going to write. Wasn't a book.
It's a monogram.
What was that called? Monogram. He's like, I don't think I have enough for a book, but it's going to be a monogram. Yeah. So he's going to write this monogram. And then he's like literally just stuck in here. And you keep bringing up the secretary scene like that. That is the most heartbreaking scene in this whole movie. You're just like, oh, because you really think like they're going to like get together in this movie. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh, hold on. Let me talk to you. I got to
hang on. Let me go make out with this man.
Then that's
life.
Perfect.
That's life, and then meanwhile in the basement, he's Angus is with this, this beautiful PYT pretty young thing. And like he gets ripped away from that. That was the one moment though where I'm serious. The one moment where I was like, oh no, because they had just met and she ends up, I think she kisses his lip, right? I couldn't tell because it's so close up that it may have been like off lip, like a little cheeky, but I believe they kissed. But they kissed like 5 minutes after meeting each other, and I was like, "Ooh, no! They should have just shared a look." It would have been
longer. I think it would have been longer than 5 minutes based off what's going on.
And there was clearly some attraction and all that, so I was okay with it. But at the time, I was like, "Oh no!" But then, in retrospect, I was like, "Okay,
when you think about that Christmas party scene, it's over the course of the party. So we're like checking in on different events as they're happening. So it could be longer than what we're actually experiencing. And then talking about our main character Angus Sessa is a little off for me when he plays the perfect college kid. Like he's like, again, he's just still a little rough around the edges. You can kind of feel like, he's very new, but he's not bad. He's just kind of like, you're like, he's a little rough. And he's dealing with his own turmoil. I love the reveal of his father's mental health because at first we're led, he's dead. And there's some ghost, some backstory we don't know about him. And then surely over time we find out that he is just holding on to his father. Like there's kind of this theme that I'll get to, but it's kind of about like the past and how he's holding on to this past, how that he's holding on to the nostalgia, much like we talk about, like you've talked about watching this movie of, his family before. And then you reveal that his dad is like severely mentally ill. And like, you just feel for him and you're just like, now I see why his life has just been in shambles because his mom doesn't really like pay attention to him the way that he thought he would. So he just feels like he's kind of left out. And now that's why he acts out. He's smart. He's like a very intelligent guy, but he's just an asshole, just like Hunnam. And I feel like, and I kind of see how they bond, those two characters bond because of their a-holeness, their dickishness. They're just kind of mean to a lot of other characters. But there's a reason why they're mean. It's because they have just been beat down by life so much. And then they kind of bond over those two things. And I really appreciate that. And then finally you got Rudolph, Mary Lamb, and she's not like the biggest arc in this story. Like she's there, she's present, but I think she's there to kind of be the catalyst to kind of push Hunnam to be like, don't be a dick to this kid. Like open your eyes. Like
I mean,
he's dealing with some stuff.
obviously
And
they become like mother, father, son, and she
son. Yes.
repeatedly is like, "What the
Family
hell's
element
wrong
that
with you?
happens.
You don't like." And that's and it's not one of those situations where it's like she's right and he's wrong. They're both right.
Right.
That is the complementary nature of men and women. Today we're taught that women are always right, men are stupid. No, screw all that. Men are disciplinarians, women are the nurturers. We need each other because we're simultaneously correct and incorrect at all times. If men are always being disciplinarians and sometimes soft, and women are always being nurturing and sometimes hard, what that leads to is both are always correct and incorrect depending on the situation. So when you have a moment where a kid's acting up, it's time to be a disciplinarian. And then there are other times where she's correct. She's like, it's the holidays. Go a little softer. Maybe you should take them to Boston, stuff like that. And so they really become this kind of makeshift family out of and audience always respond really well to the making the best of a bad situation story, because it's like you have the kid whose parents don't give a damn about him. You have the lonely professor who's just like led a hard life, and then you have the woman who recently lost her son. And it's to see the to take the shattered, like to throw a metaphor around that, all of their vases, if they're all vases, they've been shattered. They're all shattered, but they pick up those pieces and they make a new one. Right. They don't just make a new one. They make like a mosaic. They make a mosaic that just where all their pieces kind of fit together. And it's beautiful. That's why movies like this, that's why stories like this resonate, and they just work.
One other element that I want to kind of bring up. So one of her biggest backstory part is that you find out very quickly, and it's you kind of have to figure it out as you're going. You're like, oh, okay, I get it. Her son had died in I believe they're saying he died in Vietnam, right?
Yeah,
and 100%. Her son, under circumstances where she didn't have the money to afford, because they kind of post this, they paint this fictional academy, Barton, this boarding school, as like this elite academy where the students of this academy usually go off to really big rich schools because the parents are really rich to begin with. She is not rich, and I'm kind of feel like I felt for the situation because my wife is teaching at a school where she's teaching with kids whose parents are really rich, and like I have our kids going to the school, fortunately. And so it was very similar. I felt some similarities there, but she's the cafeteria worker, and they were allowing her to have her son being taught at this school. So he got this good education.
So
and
she had all this hope.
She had all this hope. And there's a part of this movie where you can kind of feel the connection between her and Hunnam's character, because they both view Barton as this institution that they have kind of grabbed onto as like this thing of hope, where it's like, my son went here, he's going to go to great education. And he, and as far as Hunnam, he really believes that Barton is this really great place, and like we're going to make great men, even though everyone around him isn't really doing those things. And he's the only a-hole. He's the Chucky Rants, essentially, of just like, no, you guys have to have standards, and everybody else is like, nah, the rich daddy's going to pay for this, so we kind of have to slide here. And he's like, no, what the hell? And I feel like it's kind of interesting. That aspect of it's interesting because it's like they're holding on to this thing and it's failing them, and yet they're still holding on. And then but at the end, she eventually realizes that, like, even though her son's gone, her sister's going to have a kid, and so she can kind of like, I can help foster the future, you know, in that way.
Yeah.
So that all brings me back to my favorite scene in this movie, and it's when they're at the museum. And
do you need me to take over? Because I'm getting an OHMS.
I'm getting. Oh my god!
This is what you sounded like before you broke down. Do you need a break?
Man, I'm gonna break down. This movie's so good.
I hear it coming on.
My favorite scene. Oh, dude. Yeah, like I think about.
Punch yourself in the gut a few times. You'll feel better.
Just a little bit of levity. Hold on, let me get some alcohol in me. Okay.
I get give me a turn if you need a moment.
Give me a turn. Okay, but
does it? Okay,
my
does this
favorite
show the
scene in
effectiveness
movie-
of this movie though? Ain't nobody
That's
crying
my
over. I mean,
favorite.
nobody's crying over Oppenheimer, but we already established
No.
it's a tour de force. It is an incredible film. Killers is just they're both of those movies are retelling of factual events, but
Right.
we agree that the
This is
style,
like a story
the heart, like
that is
Oppenheimer
just, like,
hits.
you, and you're like, ah.
This is a complete. This isn't just retelling something that happened. This is completely fictional, but it feels real. Like I said, you submit
Right.
yourself to this story, and everybody. I mean, so far, everybody commenting on it is like, "I love this." You don't walk
Right.
out of the other movies being like, "I'm
There's
in love."
so many people
You
that are
walk
like,
out
I
of
love
this
this movie.
loving it, And so
Right.
I like real quick, just to give you a break, McCurdy. I was talking before about the movie Her. Her never turns a corner where the AI is gonna kill what's his name, Joaquin Phoenix, or it never turns a corner where it's like the writer, who was Spike Jonze, didn't have anywhere to take the story, so there's an explosion. Like it never pulls that BS out of its
Right.
ass. And it reminded me of this reminded me of a fantastic novel that any of you, I wish I had an affiliate link in the description.
You have your fucking novel that you gift people, don't you? You have that novel, that Christmas gift that you give people, and everyone looks at you.
Oh yeah.
I love
He's
that.
got like 24 copies of
He's got
meditation.
a bunch of
That's great.
copies, and he's like, "This
That's
is the Bible, the Quran."
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
both, and I do love that moment because both like both Mary and Angus are just like, yeah, we're not gonna read this book.
Yeah, she's
I
like,
love,
well,
I
you
just love
give
that.
everybody
We're like,
this.
we have religion, we don't need this.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell that. I love that part. Anyway,
And
sorry,
that's a
continue.
whole can of worms in and of itself. The fact that he's an atheist is just like, well, yeah, because he existence hasn't been good to him, so he's bitter against God, which is like, my take. I've talked about that a million times, but including
Anyway,
Skyfall.
so you're talking about this book.
Skyfall, I go deep on that. But
Hold on, you're talking about your book.
So okay,
You-
not my book, not my book. There's a fantastic
boxes of it.
novel. Fantastic. It's on the shelf. I won't go grab it though. Anybody who loved this movie, and if you see this movie, you love it. Otherwise, you suck. There's this great novel called A Gentleman in Moscow. If you like this movie, you should read that book. It's very similar. What it's about is so the gentleman, the titular gentleman, is he's got some. I think he used to be royalty, but either way, he's highly educated, very wealthy. But the Bolshevik Revolution takes over Russia to where it's like instead of killing him, they basically put him on house arrest in the most expensive, classiest hotel in Moscow. And so the whole novel, the whole book is him living in this hotel. And I thought of it the whole time watching this, not only because it's people stuck in a certain location for a certain amount of time. Again, this was 2 weeks. That novel is like decades. But specifically, every time you think, oh, the story's going to take off now. It's about this. No, it's just that for a chapter, and then it goes back this way. And then, so now it's going to be about this war. Now this war is going to be the rest of the story. This change now is the catalyst that's going to take us to the end of the story. No, it just changes again. And that's this is one of those the way this is written and the way Gentleman in Moscow is written is it's masterful because it holds you from beginning to end without ever conceding itself to, as I said in my opener, the formulaic storytelling of, well, and then at this minute, this should happen. And then at 10 minutes later, this should happen. It's its own thing. It's not stuck to what other movies do in a formulaic way. It is specific unto itself. It's its own thing. It is specific unto itself. And that's where this is masterful in that sense.
Right. Hold on. So, okay, back to my favorite part of this movie is when they're in the museum. They go to Boston. He takes them to the museum.
Yeah.
Because they have to be a field trip. And it's like, we have to have educational stuff in this.
Yeah.
And there's this great moment because these characters have been at odds with each other for a good chunk of the movie. But there's been some, like, obviously they've made some headway because Angus hurt himself and Angus covered for Paul Giamatti, and that part was great too.
Yeah.
And so he lies his ass off for him, which that gets to another point. But
Yeah,
when they go to the museum, he has this point about talking about the history of the past. And you and I have talked about this in the past, like how
That's what my whole book's about.
Okay. Calm down, Chuggy Rants. But we talk about this a lot, but he talks about the past and he's like, yeah, take a look at that pottery. And he looks at it and he's like, it's straight up pornography. You're like, oh, okay. And he's like, yeah, it's
candy cane.
What does he say? It's candy cane. Yeah, he says it's candy cane. He says, what does he say? He says history. He says the past is just teaching us about our present, or something along those lines.
If you want to find yourself, look at the past, something like that.
Right.
But yes,
but he's also saying he's like every point in
every
time
generation thinks they invented debauchery. They think they invented rebellion. They think they're the first. Everybody falls victim to we are the leading. We're the spearhead of
we
progress.
Started this,
and
it's
this is history. History is always we're at the forefront of progress.
Changes.
Blah blah blah. No, you're an idiot. If you think that, you're stupid. This is life. A sine wave like this. Any idiot out there who thinks it's just this, things are always getting better. You are mistaking technological progress for progress of human nature, which doesn't exist. You're an asshole if you think that, but everybody thinks that. And that is the core thesis of the book I wrote, is that progress, essentially people mistake technological progress. Like even a friend of the channel, he was like, old people are stupid because they can't change the HDMI input on their television. And I was like, okay, you think that because you're an idiotic progressive who thinks that old people don't know anything. Old people are, maybe they're not as smart as you when it comes to playing Xbox, but they are infinitely more wise than you because of their experience. And every generation thinks they know better than their parents, and reflecting the beginning of wisdom comes with the fear of God. Well, metaphorically, your parents are God. They are your creator. They know more than you. There's a time in everybody's life where they think they're smarter than their parents, and then inevitably they go, oh, I actually don't know anything, do I? I'm very stupid. I thought I was so damn smart, but I'm really stupid. And so that's what he's getting at. That's what he's trying to teach this kid. And then at the same time, he's trying to teach him that your father inevitably wants you to be him, but you're not him, because you have to find your own way, especially because your dad is rotting away in an insane asylum, right? But just like the prodigal son, you leave the nest and you're like, Dad's stupid and he's telling me what to do all the time and I hate him. But then you eventually do become your dad, ideally, because your dad isn't just your dad. Your dad is your dad's dad, going all the way back to the beginning of time, inhabiting a certain spirit, a certain way of approaching life that is tried and true. So that's like that's like one little element of this movie that,
what I was getting at with that though is that the idea that it's like it teaches like the past, because he's a history teacher, right? And he's all about like he's talking about Italy and France and all these like places of the past, and
and they're like,
as
what
a
do we
kid
need
at that
that
age
for?
Right, at a kid at
That's
that age,
past,
everyone's like, that's boring. That's boring. But I think there's a part of that it's like, well, you're teaching. Yeah, we look to the past and it can teach us about our present and as well as our future. And I think about that when I'm thinking about the movie in regards to back to Mary Lamb's story. It's like she had this tragic tragedy that happened to her, but then it's like, oh wait, I've learned all this experience. I've had all this experience, and now I can pass that on to my sister who's having her baby. And now I can focus all my energies now to my aunt, my niece or nephew that I'm going to have. And now that, so there's still hope there. And so, oh God, this movie's so beautiful. Just like all of
now,
like all of
apply
those
that
elements.
to Paul. Apply that to Paul.
Yeah.
Paul, same thing
Okay,
there.
so the end of the
Paul's
movie.
like,
Boy,
I got screwed over. I got screwed over by some rich a-hole where, you know, because I mean, I don't know if you have any similar stories, but I've told this story before where when I started my job in advertising in Chicago, I was with a whole bunch of interns, and day one, a bunch of people came in and they were like seriously, they'd come in every 5 minutes, some new face would come in and be like, oh my God. And there were all these hugs between interns that weren't me and these employees, these established employees.
Right.
And I remember after, hours of this, somebody came in and they were like, okay, because they all knew all the other interns because they were, good people, like friends of mine, but Nepo babies all the same. Where it was like somebody came in and they go, okay, I know why you're here. Like, I know your parents, I know your parents, I know your parents. And they point at me, they go, why are you here? And I go, I'm here to make videos. Apparently I'm good at it. Like I was like, I might as well not have parents because essentially, who are your parents? I was like, I might as well not have parents, and that's where that is Mr. Paul's whole story is that he's trying to reflect the hierarchy that should rule things. It shouldn't be the case that the offspring of capable people take over their position, because oftentimes the second generation is not as good as the first. And why is that? Well, it's because the first generation who find success, they go through hardship and then they become wealthy, let's say, and influential and all powerful. And they have this idiotic notion of, well, I don't want my children to suffer like I did. So they pamper them. They pamper them and they turn them into little buttheads. And we see that with Kunst, I think it was.
He's like one of my favorite characters that are just like, he's there in the beginning and then you don't see him for a huge chunk of the movie. And then he shows up again and he's got this huge sunburn from skiing.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
And
he's also a big prick. Like, just
he represents that entitlement of like, well, my dad's rich, so I don't actually have to be good at anything. And this is how corruption creeps into a society, because parents love their kids. That's great. But when parents abuse their kids by not pushing them, right? By not forming them into them, by not forcing them to go through hardship, because adversity builds character. That is, and that might, I don't know, but that might come straight out of meditations. I mean, that is real stuff. Doing hard stuff builds character. But what are these kids used to? They're used to everything being provided to them. It's like kids today who get nothing but screen time, and they don't actually become anybody. Because when you're a kid, you're like, what does character mean? What does that mean? Well, once you're older, you're like, oh, character essentially is like who are we interested in this movie? We're not interested in those bratty kids. There's no character to them. They're nothing. They're full of nothing. We're interested in the people with the backstory, with who have gone through things, who have seen adversity, seen hardship. We're interested in those people. They're characters. In real life, it's the same thing. There's people who just never go through anything. They have nothing to say. They have no opinions. They're just blank. They're empty vessels. And so Paul is trying to correct the injustice of his past, where he was screwed over by another Nepo baby, where he's like, no, we should have standards. We should hold people to those standards so that when they graduate and become powerful people, they actually bring some kind of humanity and qualification to that position they hold, instead of just allowing these empty vessel Nepo babies, these useful assholes, to take positions of power. Well, look where we are from 1970, 1971 to now, where it's like, this is how corruption enters society, because I mean, as we've talked about, like Brandon Cronenberg, he's a Nepo baby. He deserves it. He brought it. He made Infinity Pool. The guy proves that he's just as good as his dad, David Cronenberg, at making films, maybe even better, right? But there are others who take these positions of power without the qualifications, and they slowly just lower us into a world of like, what are we watching now? We're watching like The Bachelor. We're watching crap movies a lot of the time that are because unqualified people take over. So Paul, his character, is trying to correct that with the little bit of influence he has. The very first scene with him, between him and the headmaster of the school, the headmaster's like, I just need you to pass this one student because his dad paid us good money to build the gymnasium or whatever. And he's like, you can ask any other teacher to do that, but not me. I'm going to hold people to a standard because that standard generates the hierarchy that builds all of society and makes us successful in the first place. So immediately I was just like, okay, I identify with this guy. I admire this guy. This is, and he holds true to that until the end. And then, and then on top of that, Angus was his best student.
But so the end of the movie, I like the end of the movie is just perfect, right? So
yeah,
the whole movie, Angus is lying for Hunnam for different reasons, but it's kind of a back and forth, but it's a little bit of like, and he's again holding on to his Barton standards, like, Barton men don't lie, but he's lying for Hunnam so that he can get out of these situations. And sometimes they're kind of white lies to make him look better than, for instance, the scene right after they're going to skating, he runs into an old Harvard graduate or a Harvard student that he had went with. And he lies to say, oh, this is my uncle, and he's writing a book, and like makes him look great, even though he never did any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, why did you do that for me and everything? And he's like, well, like, what, screw that guy. Like, you don't deserve all
that
this.
Guy doesn't deserve my story.
Right.
He's not deserving
and
of
so,
it, which was a very human. And again, this is where you could only tell the story in the past, because that same guy could get on Facebook and be like, whatever happened with
right.
Paul.
But but then we get to the end of this movie, and then finally we've had that buildup, because he lied before that when he broke his arm. So we finally get the buildup of like, so he comes, and this whole thing to go to Boston is all culmination of, hey, I want to go see my dad. And he finally finds that out. We find out his dad's in the mental institution. And there's this whole other thing going on with Angus's parents, where his mom left his dad.
He's like, he shows up. He just wants to be like, Dad, I've really done well in school. And he just wants his dad to, oh, it's so tragic. He just wants his dad to be like, I'm proud of you, son. And instead his dad's like,
it's like,
I'm crazy.
People are, he's like, his dad's like,
stuff in my food,
my food. And then
nuts.
you see the heartbreak in his face, and you're just like, oh my God, this kid. And so then
that's why I come back to it. This movie, I saw one review. Okay, so at generating this thumbnail, right? This thumbnail, that's the only time that I see reviews of any movie that we're covering, because there's like snippets in the titles of the thumbnails. I'm trying to avoid them, but inevitably I see some stuff. One of them was like, this movie's triumphant. And I was like, no, it's not. This is why I hate reviewers, because they're so full of crap. And they're just paid to say things like masterpiece and triumphant. This movie isn't triumphant. If it was triumphant, it would be Dead Poet Society. This movie is a reflection of how things don't work out in life, and you need to act accordingly.
But this movie has a lot of
beauty in
that. And I think that was the thing. When I came out of this movie, the words I would have used, not triumphant, I would have used hope and wholesome. And for me, hope rings true a lot with this movie. Gonna get a little emotional here. Let me get some Jim Beam real quick, so I don't get super emotional. Let me punch myself. Let me punch myself in the stomach real quick. But the end of the movie,
no, don't feel it.
God, this movie's great.
Don't feel
anything. So anyway, the end of this movie, he lies. So the parents come and they find out that he was not supposed to go to visit his dad. He's like, now I got to worry about my dad. And you really see how the parents are kind of pieces of shit, because they obviously they're more worried about the situation with dad.
But they never escalate.
The kids own Angus's future.
To my point, though, they never escalate to where the mom is out of order and everything she says
remember
is
when we
civil
talked about,
and makes sense. Right.
As opposed to like,
how dare you? I want your job. You're fired, sir.
No.
I insist he get fired. It's none of that. It wasn't
as
classy.
Okay.
And real.
That's like a good. that's kind of like how I felt about 5 days, the opposite of how we felt about Five Nights at Freddy's with the aunt, and how like she just felt like very out of character for like
Yeah.
she's this rich woman, so why does she need this kid? That doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. But back to the movie.
Wait,
So
I think
he
it was
lies. He lies, and he
Nico
said, "Oh, it was my idea."
Nico said Five Nights at Freddy's is the highest grossing horror movie of the year. So
Here, it's the highest grossing horror movie in the same way that Mario, even though Mario is kind of in the mid tier of this list.
Oh, I know.
People love Mario, so that's why it made a lot of money.
Pre-sold property.
It wasn't the best movie. I enjoyed it. I had fun seeing it. But back to Holdovers.
But it sucks.
When we get to that moment where Paul Giamatti decides, and he just puts his whole career on his line, because this whole movie we've had this buildup of him being like, Barton Academy is the greatest thing. This is this great institution. I believe in Barton Academy. It's like been my whole life. I've almost lived here, and everyone's asking like, when are you going to leave? When are you going to go here? I was like, I don't know, someday. Finally, he's pushed and like it's perfect, because it's in one respect, it's a sacrifice. He sacrifices his whole career, his whole life. He gets to tell the principal, who's a piece of shit. He's like, tells him off. What does he say to him? He says, "You'd be penis cancer."
But it's all everything. Like there are several scenes throughout the whole movie.
Penis cancer.
There's several scenes where he's talking to what he would call troglodytes. He talks to just a low class Vietnam vet at some point. He talks to some drunks at a bar where he's using not just $10 but like $100 words.
Really
and
pretentious.
He's
bringing,
but not even pretentious. He's just bringing
just like a lot of
it's like know your audience,
right?
And so he's saying highly intellectual things that remember the in the beginning where they were panning all of the professors or the teachers, I guess.
Yeah, and then they get to
that's where he should have been bringing up things like what Saint Nick looked like back in the 1600s.
And they send the Nicholas,
but here he's at a bar, or it's always in a bar. It's in a bar with a bunch of troglodytes, and he's saying things like at one point he's like, we'll purchase something for you to imbibe, and then we will blah blah. And the woman translates. She's like, he's saying he'll buy you a beer, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. So the whole point is that he's like out of his element all the time, and like using he's speaking to
he thinks he's talking to his students, and
he's obviously very intelligent. He's kind of like Walter White, where he's overqualified for his job. He should be everything that he laid out, where he's like, yeah, I travel the world and I give all these speeches and talks. That's what he should be doing. But just like Walter White, a horrible injustice held him back. So then at the end of the movie, coming full circle, at the end of the movie, he's talking to the after the headmaster fires him. And side note, the headmaster is one of his first students. He says in a series of $10, $100 words, he's like, I have the requisite experience of you are penis cancer in human form. and the whole theater is just erupts. Dude, that's
because we already know, he kind of, because you know ahead of time that he screwed him over to have to do all this stuff. It's just so great. But then there's the part where he's like leaving, and like what's his name, the little shit kid that hangs around Angus, the one that with the sunburn, whatever his name is. He's like,
Kuntz.
I saw him eating feces. Kuntz. He's like, I think you got fired for eating feces. They caught him sitting there at the bowl.
Yeah,
at the commode.
Fishing out,
pulling turds out of the
fishing turds. Yeah,
but I love that scene because it's like, Angus recognizes that basically he sacrificed himself so Angus could have a better life for himself. So Angus, there's
even though Angus isn't the best student, Angus is still a B student, but he's like, he's like, he may not cure cancer, but he still brings something to the table rather than being cannon fodder in Vietnam. Right. That was his whole thing.
And I think that's the thing in the movie. This movie barely talks about Vietnam, but it's like, okay, I lied. It does talk about Vietnam, but it doesn't make it super forefront. So we don't get like we're watching the news, and all of a sudden it's like Vietnam. Like we get maybe 2 or 3 mentions of it. One being Mary's son being killed. That's like the biggest one. The other one being at the bar when he goes to the bar and then he kind of pisses off one of the Vietnam vets who had had his hand blown off. That we kind of parts it. So
Okay.
it's in the background, and we
Hang
kind
on.
of don't really acknowledge it.
Hang on though. That moment too, in a different movie that would have been triumphant and inspiring, he would have made friends with the Vietnam vet who was missing his right arm,
Right.
and Angus's left
Oh.
arm. Either
Well, that would've
I
been a
think
whole
I think it
different
was
movie.
it his right? But the
Oh
idea
yeah,
was
'cause by
that
that point he had been
they,
at that point
both of
yeah,
them
he
were
broke his
missing an
arm at that
arm,
point.
and that
Right.
for them to play
Ah. Pinball.
why is my brain off? Pinball. For them to play
Pinball.
I'm dumb tonight. For them to play pinball together, they can't play because they're all both missing an arm, so they could have played together.
That's a good
That was the
catch.
whole
Did
idea
not
there.
catch that.
In the
That's
triumphant film, they would have made amends and they would have played together. But that's not this movie. This movie we've showcased numerous times tonight that the writer of this movie knows exactly what he's doing, including how not just letting the story meander the way it needs to hold you and to make you fall in love with it beginning to end, but also there's a series of callbacks throughout that whole thing, be it Kuntz getting his comeuppance at the end, or like we said, covering each other's asses, lying for each other, and then and then the other guy lying for the other one down the road. But also, like you just said, oh yeah, I heard he got fired because he was fishing out turds from the toilets or something. Well, that was a callback to the very first scene with the kids in the beginning where they're like, Paul,
the
hummus
Cobb
is late.
salad?
He's probably jerking off in the Cobb salad. And that was that kid who delivered that line. That was where I was like, okay, I guess I already know Alexander Payne is a talented director, but that was the moment where I was like, okay, I am along for the ride, because the kid did a face melt. I love face melts. And if any of you haven't caught, my favorite face melt of all time is from something I made. I might be biased, but if any of you ever went to my channel and watched Man Crush, my buddy Bill Kenny did the best face melt I've ever seen. Which a face melt is where you're like normal, and then that where like you melt to like, oh no. And the kid, he's probably jerking off the Cobb salad, and the kid's like,
I eat that Cobb salad.
Do you know something? That's where it's like,
I eat that Cobb salad.
Right away, you knew the caliber of comedy that this movie was going to deliver, and it just did from beginning to end. Everybody, including that woman that I mentioned, like that woman, just everything that would happen. She's like, "Oh no," or "Yay," or "Oh," and like she was leading the charge with everybody laughing their asses off. It's just like, this movie delivers on everything to where I walked out of it loving it more than Killers. Oppenheimer, I have a hard time putting it above Oppenheimer because that movie is bigger. Killers is also bigger. Beau Is Afraid is also bigger. Infinity Pool is not. It immediately trumps Infinity Pool. The scope of Beau Is Afraid and Killers and Oppenheimer are bigger, but the emotionality, the love of this movie,
I think
immediately trumps Beau and Killers.
For me, it comes down to like, okay, so between Killers and this movie, I think it comes down to this. I think Scorsese, when we talked about that movie, I think we were both like, dude, Scorsese's done. He can't, like, he's already at the top. He's done more than it's not like he did 2 great movies and then he didn't do anything great after that. He's done multiple great movies.
Yeah.
And so you're just like, dude's a master. It doesn't really matter what he makes at this point.
He's
even the way that movie, even the way he does nothing and nothing left to move. Even the way Killers of the Flower Moon is made and the way it's shot, there's nothing that fantastic about it. It's not like Oppenheimer where Nolan's really doing a lot with the editing as well as the shots and the composition to really kind of pull this story together and make sitting in a room more exciting than what you thought it would be. With this, I'm sorry, with Killers though, I think the real thing is like, I think we kind of honed on is he kind of just made that movie because he wanted to pull that story for the forefront so people knew about it. So people knew this This happened in America. And that to me, it's like, it's admirable, but it's not, it has kind of like the intention of like, hey, this is the intention of this is just to let people know this happened, versus the intention of this story is like, I just want you to experience a really great story that can hit everybody's heart in different ways, and people can kind of feel for it, especially if you're going through crap in life.
It's already threatened to make you emotional several times tonight.
I just love this movie.
And that's what I mean, where it wins
It's
over
good.
everything.
I would put it above Kill.
Right.
Like after talking about it, yeah, I'm like hesitant to do those types of things because we think about it. Is it?
There's
Yes,
a tiny
probably
little
put it
voice
below
in the
Killers.
back of my head that's like, it's even better than Oppenheimer, but I easily shut that out. Where I'm like, no, Oppenheimer.
It's better than Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer is a tour de force. It is, as we
I
keep
really don't
saying,
think it's.
it is Nolan's
I will
masterpiece.
really be shocked.
Or not.
I will be shocked if this doesn't, like, you know. I mean, I would not be surprised if this got awards. I'd be shocked if it wasn't nominated. But I think a lot of people. I've seen a lot of other people review this, and they're saying like a lot of the same things that we've been saying tonight. Is like, I love this movie. I just want to live in this movie. I you know, it's like, well, this is my new favorite movie this year. I don't know why, but it just is. It just gives you all the great feels. And it's just because it's just the way this story is just very kind of simple story with very small cast, and really start to feel for these people. And I love
like, dude, have you ever been, were you ever in school after hours and just exploring? I mean, where you're just kind of, you're like, I'm here all the time, but I've never gone in that door, or I've never explored this, and I've done that, and that's where I was
talking
just
about
like,
the scene where he's going through and he's like, he steals the keys, he goes gets ice cream, he's like goes into all these rooms,
drinking
and stuff.
the church wine and
Drinking the church wine,
like
all that stuff. I'm like, it's great. Just
yeah,
but no, you're right. But like, I think, like, I know you were talking.
Oh, there's a certain feeling. Sorry, but there's a certain feeling to that where it's like everybody's gone home. I mean, I would say the flip side of this movie, the polar opposite, is The Shining, where it's the same concept. It's here's an institution,
but it's
and
not.
Everybody
it's not
goes home, and who's left? 3 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mother, father, and son. And in The Shining. Father goes crazy and tries to murder them with an axe. And with this, he would love to do that, right? Like, there are times where he's like, I'd love to kill both of you with an axe and just not have to deal with you anymore. But this is the lighthearted. Somebody should make a YouTube essay. I'll try to do that in 5 years. YouTube essay about how The Shining and The Holdovers are the same movie. But this one is like, it immediately, and especially with the soundtrack right away and everybody going home, that feeling of, like I keep saying, my favorite time of year was always that time between school ending, first semester ends and second semester begins, and that time in between has always been my favorite time of year, always. And we're gearing up to hit that. And as an adult, it's different. But as a kid, where it's like you're to be forced to, I mean, for me, like, I went to IU, Indiana University, and I reached a point where I was staying there over holidays because I loved being there. And so this, and you know, all the shots of campus and the snow. I mean, I was there. I would stay there for a couple of weeks and just kind of kill time. And there's a certain feeling to going to the places where normally they're chock full of people, but now all those people are gone, and you feel like you own the city. You're like, the whole city, the whole campus is mine. And then when people show back up again, you're like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. This is my place. This is my house.
Right.
What are you doing here? You know?
Right.
So there's such a feeling attached to that came out of me the moment that, like, you know, the soundtrack coupled with those images of the campus and the snow, call it personal bias. But and I'm always saying we judge these movies in a vacuum, but it's not just that. It's then the rest of the film with the characterization of these people and following them. And as I said, the more you come to understand characters, love is understanding. So you fall in love with this movie. Killers is a great historical,
it's still a good
recounting
movie.
of something that actually happened. Leonardo DiCaprio sucks my balls.
He's still good.
He was
Fuck
good in
off.
that movie. I will
He's
give him
good.
credit for that movie.
Everybody in that movie. No, I think all the acting in that movie is great. But I think a big difference between this and the other movie as far as acting, because I talked to you about this Oscars a while back. It's like there's movies that comes out when the Oscars come out, and I know you have your thoughts on the Oscars, but I do tend to think that there's always kind of like a different level of acting. So there's like the one level where it's like, I gotta be big and I've gotta be explosive, or I gotta be serious and I gotta do this. And then there's a little more subtle, which is this movie, where it's a little more human and a little more believable in like the real world. Yeah.
I'm being Leo right now.
Being Leo, right. But I think Paul Giamatti's kind of like plays in between that, because he can be big and kind of like just over the top, but it's like it fits with that character where you're just like, you son of a bitch. Like, I love all that stuff. That's another detention. By the way, Silver Joy, if that's the song you want to hear, that you can listen to this Thanksgiving, when you're with your parents, like after you've eaten all your turkey, you can listen to Silver Joy by Damien Gerardo. That's the song that plays in the very beginning of the movie. That I really enjoyed, and it's very like peaceful and slow, and it's just like let me sleep. The one that
immediately
like,
puts you in the mood for this movie.
That one's great.
Perfect song.
I started listening to the soundtrack before we started doing this podcast, just to kind of put my brain back into this movie, and I just want to live. I just said that. I told somebody that after I saw this movie, I was like, I want to live in this movie. But as far as where it goes on the list, I agree. I think putting it above Killers of the Flower Moon is not out of the question. I think
it's easy.
Put it there.
I think it's easily done.
I think we can put it there. I think it's a number 2 movie. Again, Killers is great. I liked Killers, but I do think, I will say this, I think there is something to be said about this movie tells a really great story in 2 hours versus trying to tell it in 3 hours. And they're both great. But as right now, we've got like 3 movies up here that are 3 hours. This is a 2, I don't know, it's like a 2-hour movie, 2 and some change movie, but still great.
Yeah.
And you just fall in love with it. And you're just like, I love this. This is great.
You will, if you have to, if you submit yourself to it. And that's where, as we've talked about a million times, going to the movie theater for something like this. And again, I had the good fortune of being with a good audience,
Yeah.
It's just we all were in on it, and it's one of those where it's like you don't really want the movie to end, because, like you said, it's like Harry Potter. You're like, I just want to go to school at Hogwarts.
I just want to live here.
I just want to live here.
School.
Yeah.
I just want to be with Paul Giamatti. I just want to be in class with this kid named Kuntz who says all this dirty stuff. Like, I just want to do that. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. So I think it deserves that. It's like, it's a smaller scope, of course, and it doesn't have that Scorsese level of like everything we talked about in that episode,
as far as the
crime,
filmmaking
life
goes,
and all that,
right? But like I will say this, like, when I sometimes will talk about like filmmaking, like what a director's choice of like the camera shots or whatever it is, because like a very typical TV directing would be get the medium shot, or just get like the wide shot and then there's 2 close-ups and then we're out of the scene. And that's what a lot of what Killers of the Flower Moon is, just because I think Scorsese is just like, I don't really care. We're just getting the story. We're just getting the actors. There is a part of me that will say that this, and not that there aren't scenes that don't do that, because there are some other scenes in the movie that when it's important, he will kind of switch it up and do a little more bigger stuff. This movie still does things that are subtle, but are very impressive. Like, and I think they stick out as like a sore thumb in a good way. One being like the scene where you were talking about, like, we follow all the teachers as everyone's eating lunch in the very beginning of the movie, and then we finally fall on Paul Hunnam's seat and it's empty, and then we find out, oh, like he's being told he's going to have to be the holdover. And then we also got that shot, the really great shot of like him turning to see the girl the secretary going to kiss her boyfriend, and then you just see his face while they're kind of like running off in the background, and it's just beautiful. Like, that shot in itself is just great shot. And you just remember it, and it sticks in your head. And like, there's a lot of things like that in this movie that I think, like, I want to say, oh, his movies are all really well written, really well acted, not like super, super directed, versus Oppenheimer, where it's like, We're playing with the editing. We're playing with the color. We're playing with like what kind of shots we're doing. We're playing with the sound. Like we're playing with all the different
It's
things.
a tour de
This
force.
movie doesn't do any of that.
Yeah.
But there are slight moments we get that are subtle, but are perfect. And and I do appreciate it. Like I think that's why I love this movie. I'm just like, I want to live here. I want to live in this movie. Just want to live in there.
I think it's I'm gonna just read the top 10 because I think it kind of reflects. I mean, the top 5 even just kind of reflects. I think as usual, the list is sacred to me. I think it's perfection. I agree with you that the Holdovers is this smaller movie, but it easily trumps all these other bigger movies. But Oppenheimer is it? I'll keep using the
It
same
takes
term.
all the
It's a
big
tour de
things.
force.
I think Oppenheimer takes all the big things that work in all these bigger movies like Guardians or Ninja Turtles or Mission Impossible or John Wick. Takes all those big things, those big like camera movements and things like that, and puts it in the small movie that is like this movie.
And that is about
combines them.
It's about this one
both
man,
great.
and like we talked about in that episode, the Promethean myth is it couldn't be more perfect. Now, Oppenheimer, what do we have coming up? We have Napoleon coming up.
Well, we missed some.
Maybe it'll knock it off, but but as of right
Napoleon's
now,
the next big one we're gonna probably go see.
as of now, anyway. So like I was saying, top 10: Oppenheimer, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Beau Is Afraid, Infinity Pool, Talk to Me, Guardians 3, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's kind of funny. Mission Impossible and John Wick. That's our top 10 as of now. We're next episode will be 50, and as I keep saying, everything below like a certain level is just like nobody will remember it. Nobody will remember it. I mean, even like recently, people have been watching Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and they're like, "Oh, I thought it was pretty good." I'm like, "Let me tell you why it sucks." And then they're like, "Well, the animation's good." I'm like, "Yeah, it's not a good movie.
I'm still
it's
not
really
on it.
not a
I'm
good
still
movie.
Still not on board with you there. Sorry.
It's just, but it's not a good movie. It's messy. A lot of these movies are messy.
It's only
until you
messy to me.
reach
It's
the top
messy because it's
few.
a two-parter. But yes, I think it's in a good spot as far as our list goes. We were supposed to watch this week. Hold on, we were supposed to watch at one point. We were going to watch the Marvels instead of watching the Holdovers, and I just said, you know what? Let's just forget about watching the Marvels and watch the Holdovers. And we were going to watch that last week, but then things kind of fell in place the way we did. We ended up going back and watched Talk to Me, which I thought was a great watch. We were supposed to watch Hunger Games this week. Maybe we watch that, but I think the next one we'll probably do is Napoleon, which is the next Ridley Scott movie, which I think has got a lot of buzz on it as well. And it probably might be an Oscar contender. Who knows? And then coming up in December, there's The Bike Riders, Poor Things, Wonka, maybe Aquaman Lost Kingdom, maybe Iron Claw, maybe Ferrari, maybe The Color Purple. There's a couple movies towards Christmas where we might just be like, yeah, we watched a bunch of these movies. This is what we thought. So we'll see how we end this list. But we're gearing towards basically we've watched a movie a week by this point, which I've appreciated this.
Could you answer this question, sir?
I don't have Netflix anymore. I hate Netflix.
What?
But I will want to watch this movie.
I mean, even if you don't have it, let's just watch the movie, though.
I do want to watch The Killers. Psycho-Man 90. I do think we should watch this because
The Killers is.
It sounds like a cool time. I don't know anything
Stanley
about
Kubrick.
Kubrick. No, it's
The Killer.
The Killer. Is it based off the Stanley Kubrick movie?
No, but there's a difference between The Killers and The Killer. Is all I'm saying.
Okay. Oh, you're saying The Killers being from the Stanley Kubrick
I'm
movie.
saying you're so emotional that you're misspeaking, which is normal.
Listen, I'm actually not at this moment. I'm just drunk because I've been drinking wine and bourbon. Not bourbon. What is this? Is this yeah, technically this is bourbon. So I've been drinking wine and bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a bourbon. I just don't think of it as a bourbon because usually Jim Beam's kind of like lower tier. So I'm like, oh yeah, it is.
I just always think of like again, the thing on my brain all the time is the current Bond episode, and I've been editing the balls off of Skyfall, and the whole like, there's so many times where anybody remembers from the Quantum episode where you just keep as usual mispronouncing things, and then I profess my love to you, and then in Skyfall you can never say Silva. You're constantly saying Sylvia, and then at some point,
It's
as
Sylvia.
usual,
That's her
again, I
name.
break down. I'm just like, I love you, but girl, you're so stupid. I love you. So but
Hey, at
there's
least I
it's
have
not a big deal.
at least I have
Killer's the
things to
killer, not a big
listen.
deal. Not a big deal.
I have things to say. Okay, so no, but I haven't. I've seen the poster for that, so I'm interested in seeing.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll see. I
That's
don't know,
more
we'll see.
important than watching the Marvels. That's more
I don't
important than
have I don't care to
watching-
go back to watch it. I might go see it, but I don't care
Yeah.
to like necessarily be like, we have to go see it. Like I saw 80 for Brady earlier in the year. We could have ranked that one. We still probably could.
We could rank
That one was so-
2023 movies for
Just
the
that's
next
all
10
we
years.
do. People are going to be
'Cause
like,
it's
why
like-
are you still going over all the 2023 movies?
Now
It's just
we're
2024.
ranking 2023 movies from Russia, and it's like 10 years from now. And we're like,
Right.
we're ranking movies from
We're stuck in a
Argentina,
time- we're stuck in a
2023
time loop.
Argentinian films. I mean, it
You
could,
wanna
it-
get-
we could only do
could go on.
2023 for the rest of our lives.
Don't
and I
say
don't know
that,
if we'd ever
please.
make it,
I have
you
a
know?
movie to finish. We have a movie we need to finish that we need to like.
Yeah.
It's my understanding we're gonna
Well, that's
finish it.
2024. Who gives a damn about Pears until 2024?
Listen, we gotta finish Pairs. We gotta finish Pairs. Like I'm cracking up because you were talking about earlier, like, yeah, today's movies you have to have cell phones, and I'm just thinking about my movie, like it's just a lot of cell phones.
Oh, every scene that damn
Every
cell phone's
scene's a
going
cell
off.
phone.
Yeah,
Every scene is cell phone.
but that's how it is. That's the difference.
So now
That's
it's
why
a,
you
it's
make
a
a movie
beginner's
about
movie.
1970. It's like, oh, remember when there weren't
It's a
phones?
Yeah, it was great. You didn't have to write that into your scripts.
It's
but now it's like-
terrible,
it's the
but great. So
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, so we decided to go a different route today for our toast. Yeah, you want to talk about
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
Wait.
You got to change. I don't know why it did that. There we go.
There we go. There we go.
There we go.
I got it. Paul, Dominic, and Divine.
That's like it
Um,
rings off. That like Paul, Dominic, and Divine. Like I
Yeah.
want to go to that restaurant.
It's like
Mhm.
what's that?
I want to go get some
there's
Cherries
several
Jubilee.
there's several bands at that time that would have, like Peter, Paul, and Mary. This is basically
Yeah.
Peter, Paul, and Mary, right?
Right.
Paul, Dominic, and Divine. They definitely would have made a record together back in the 70s. But
Hell
yeah, it's like the thing that just had McCurdy almost on the verge of tears all night. That feeling of just like school's done, everything shuts down for a few weeks, and just like we just have time to kill, and then you share meals together, and you just do things together, and but take that formula and add in this idea of
like everyone's no. I think here,
being
it's
stuck.
this. But yeah, I like
Ugh,
what you said.
it's
Is like
beautiful.
Everyone's
Beautiful.
a base, and we're all just like losers. And then they figure out that like, yes, we're all losers, but we're all like, we all kind of come to an understanding with who we are as people, and like
Yeah.
we're all humans basically. And it's just like so.
Like, okay, real quick.
Gives
Remember
me-
that moment?
gives me the feels. That
Remember
part.
that? Remember
gives
that
me the
moment when they're dropping Mary off at her sister's house, and he just grabs her hand. Paul just
Yeah.
grabs her hand just to be
Yep.
like, "Bye," and she's like, "Oh, gross." He's like, "Yeah, I know. I have clammy hands because I have trichicarditis,
Yeah.
and I'm sweaty." But then at the end of the movie, when Angus thinks he's going to be kicked out of school, and she sits next to him, and she just grabs his hand, and it's not, and that's in my opener. I'm like, it's not, the movie isn't crazy dramatic. The movie is just real. And that's why
Right.
we fall in love with them. We fall in love with the story. And it all comes down to these three. These three people are, they're not perfect. They're, one's extremely overweight, but very like fair and just nice. The other one is stinky, and he's got a weird eye, and he's kind of an asshole, but
It's this one.
he
Bro.
has a reason for it. He's got a really good motivation to be an asshole. And then this kid who just has this unfortunate situation with his family, and it's just beauty. All their powers
I love it.
combined, it's
I
beautiful.
love it.
For anybody
I
who
love
hasn't
it.
seen it, You should. It's a beautiful movie, and as McCurdy keeps saying, you just want to live in their
I
world.
just want to live in this movie.
But we do live in their world because they are. It's not idealized. It's not Pandora. It's not people watching Pandora movies and killing themselves because they can't live in the perfect world. They just reflect the life such as it is, where things are unfair and the hierarchy gets undermined by nepotism, and your children die, and your father goes crazy and lives in an insane asylum. Everything is reflects reality, but like I said before, all their pots break, their life pots break, but they all make this beautiful mosaic together over the 2-week vacation. And we're right there with them to just appreciate that life before everybody comes back. And they're like, so what'd you do over break? Oh, nothing. What'd you do over break? But meanwhile, these 3 people just grow closer together. And it doesn't mean anything. Like I said, nothing changes beginning to end, except that these 3 people understand each other a little bit better. And that is beautiful. So anyway, to Paul, Dominic, and Divine.
Love it.
Cheers, sir. Go ahead and cry now, McCurdy. I'm going to turn the cameras off.
Okay.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.